Okay, so here is my video to support you on TPA Cycle Step 1B. So I've already had a video that was talking a lot about 1A. Now we want to get into 1B. So again, you're going to click that TPA material shared folder. It will take you right up to here. You want to click single subject and that you're focusing on Cycle 1, third version. And we're going to now get into Part B, right? So now once you've kind of helped the assessor understand your context, your students, what you know about them, the next step is to talk about the lesson that you're going to design in hopes to help those students that you've already addressed in Step 1A meet some prescribed learning outcome that you're going to articulate in this lesson. One of the first and obvious questions that people ask is, do I have to use the Cal TPA lesson plan or can I use my own? You definitely can use your own. But I would be careful to let you know that the assessor is used to looking at it in this format and looking for key indicators in this format. So if you could fit it in this format, it would probably be a lot easier. But feel free if you want to. But what I'm going to suggest, which I'll show you at the end of this video, is that you want to make sure whatever is in that sample optional lesson plan for you, that you align it well with the rubric. And so that way they can see those things. So as you go through this template, is the only one I'm going to go through now. Obviously you give a lesson or title of the lesson, the subject. So again, you're going to focus on some standard-based topic here. The subject's math, the grade level it is. I'm giving you examples that I hope you got that transference there. So give me the standard, the subject you're teaching, the grade level you're teaching, time frame, whether it's block, not block, how many minutes are being given there. The California state standards that you're addressing. Again, the title of the lesson will just be kind of the topical version of this or the objective of this. ELD standards, and then you want to write out those specific learning goals or what we call learning objectives. So content of the lesson. So this is where you're going to start making those connections that I talked about in the last video. So based on students' assets, what do you expect students to deeply understand about this lesson? What do you expect students to retain after this lesson and use in future learning? So you're really just talking about the why. I'm teaching this lesson because A, these are the students that I have and I'm teaching students, not curriculum, not content. And B, this is the purpose of this lesson in the grand scheme of what I'm trying to accomplish with these kids within this, unit or this time frame that I have with them. So you want to articulate that in the content of the lesson. You also want to articulate based on, again, their needs. What are some misunderstandings or misconceptions you expect these students to have about this lesson? All students have potential misconceptions or have the potential to have a misconception about what you're about to teach. So how are you going to clarify that? And you want to write that there. I fully expect that they're going to be not prepared for this, or they may slightly misunderstand this. And so I'm going to make sure I do X, Y, and Z. And then what knowledge, skills, abilities, higher order thinking, and academic language development do you expect students to have after engaging in this lesson? So you want to talk about, I hope they'll be more critical thinkers in this way. I hope they've acquired this academic language. I hope that they have, this understanding, this skill set. We've talked about this before. Once you break down that standard, you should be able to articulate what skills and what knowledge they need, and you want to put that in this box. Okay, the next thing they want to know is how will you assess what you're trying to accomplish here? So again, writing down the essential questions, this is more for you. This is not like the essential question that you would think that you would have in a classroom where you say, okay, today's essential question is. This is more of the criteria that you are posing for yourself to determine if students are meeting, not meeting, or exceeding the learning goal, right? And so you basically take this learning goal and you kind of articulate through questions the criteria for whether or not students will meet this goal. Can they do this? Students will be able to blah, blah, blah. So you can really just kind of formulate that learning goal into a question to guide you to the criteria of what you're looking for to know that students have actually met the goal. Okay, what will students do to demonstrate achievement of the content during the lesson? Both of these, I'm thinking ahead, sorry. Let me go with this one. So what will students do to demonstrate achievement of the content during the lesson? This is where you describe the actual assessment. Students will write a paper, students will do, an exit ticket, students will do some kind of projects, monitor students' conversations. You're really wanting to articulate what is the actual assessment that students are doing. And then in line with these essential questions, this is where Cal TPA gets a little redundant. How will you know students understand the content? you're going to articulate that criteria. So as I'm walking around and looking at student conversation, I'm going to be looking for the following key factors. I'll be looking for them to say this, or to make comments like this, or to think this way. And that way I will know through this criteria and through the evidence that I'm collecting that they've met that learning goal. So if that makes sense. And if not, come see me in office hours. We can kind of massage it out and clarify it and go through examples. Okay, structured student learning activities. And I want to be careful too. I just said going through examples. Doesn't mean I'm going to give you the answers to what you're thinking of. I can give you some kind of hypothetical examples so that you can transfer it to your own content area. Okay, so structured student learning activities. So again, based on students' assets, what activities will the students be involved in during the lesson to support, engage, and challenge their achievement of the learning goal? So you just describe the activities, right? Because I know my students are interested in this, because I know about my students' funds of knowledge, because I know about my students' prior academic knowledge, I'm going to give this activity that should then support their learning, help them get engaged in the learning, or even stretch them and challenge their learning. Because again, I know about them. I know what they're bringing to the table. How will you group students and manage group work to support student learning? Same thing, right? Like, so I'm going to do some grouping. This is how I'm going to group them. And this is more importantly too, how are you going to manage that class and talk about some of the routines and procedures and norms that you'll have in place. And then last but not least, how will you engage students in higher order thinking? So each of these activities should be at the higher levels of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, interpretation, and or transfer. If they are anywhere below that, comprehension, recall, application, you want to stretch, right, your lesson to go higher. And those are the things they'll be looking for in those activities. And then last, again, instruction, how it's supporting learning. What instructional strategies will students use learning through multiple modalities, meaning reading, writing, speaking, listening, thinking, all of those different types of modalities so that students are getting a lot of opportunity to access the curriculum through those multiple modalities. And even just as we've learned through learning preferences, right? Visual, hands-on, those kinds of things. What resources, materials, and or educational technology will your students use during this lesson? So you want to articulate those, right? They'll use a worksheet, they'll use their Google Chromebooks, they'll, be playing Kahoot, whatever the case may be. And then here is where you really want to get into your focus students, right? So what adaptations and accommodations, including, as appropriate, assistive technologies will support those focus students and other individual student learning needs beyond the UDL supports built into the lesson. Which I'll talk about why UDL is important as you integrate it through the lesson, but this is that time now to make the connection between your focus students and your lesson. I'm specifically going to do this in this lesson because, not that you have to articulate it really clearly here, but you can. I'm doing this strategy in this lesson because of these students over here, and you're making that kind of rationale and that connection. So this is what they're looking for in the plan. I know to you it may seem a little non-traditional in your plan because you're used to having kind of an objective. After an objective, you talk about, the activities, and you maybe intermingle. You might have a lot of these components organized in different ways, but I tell you this template does have everything we've talked about in class, right? It does have your standard, your objective, and the content of the lesson, how you're going to assess whether they're learning that content, the activities that you will use to support their learning of that content, and then specifically what you will do for diverse learners. So it's very simplified, just maybe a little bit in a different order. So let's then get into this next piece. So I'm going to go back. Oh, I take that back. I did want to be in there. We'll go to the assessment guide. So how does the assessment guide, these rubrics, link back to this lesson? So I'm going to scroll down without giving you hopefully too much of a headache. And again, I would encourage you to go back up and read step 1B right here, and answering these questions and recognizing things. They'll give you lots of different ideas. They'll talk a little bit more about the UDL approach. So there's all these things in here that will help you in writing that lesson plan. But you want to read through this, perform that, or write out that lesson plan. And then to make sure, this answers the big question that a lot of you are asking yesterday, which is, I don't know if my materials are detailed enough. Well, go back to the rubric, right? And if you do not have enough detail to address what they want to see in the rubric, you add more. You don't want to just add details for adding details because you're like, oh, it looks short, or it looks like I don't have enough. You want to make sure what you have on your paper aligns with the rubric, right? And so candidates' lesson plan includes manageable and appropriate goals that clearly build on students' prior content knowledge. They're going to go into this lesson plan. They're going to look at the goal. They're going to look at the content, and they're going to look at these activities, and they're going to look at the instruction to support learning, and they're going to want to see that you've made those connections. Candidate clearly identifies the kind of evidence they will look for to determine that students meet the learning goals and the assessments they will use to make this determination. I bet you I could just ask you the question right now, where would you find that in the lesson plan? So if you want to pause the video to kind of self-assess yourself, do so. And then when you unpause and come back, I'm going to tell you, they're going to try to look for that right here, right? So in this section, if you're worried, I don't know if I'm being detailed enough, go back to here. In that section, did I identify the kinds of evidence that I will look for to determine that students are meeting the learning goals and the assessments I will use to make that determination? If those things are there, right, so you're given the criteria and the assessments you will use to collect that evidence and determine, or to, measure that, or to use that criteria. Sorry, I'm tripping over my own words. First, let's start with the assessment. You're going to describe the assessments you're going to use. Then you're going to talk about what you're going to look for in those assessments to determine if students are meeting the goal, which would be the criteria, right? So that's all you need to include in that section. If you have that very clearly stated, you've got enough. You don't have to worry about, do I have enough paragraphs, enough sentences? Is it long enough? You know that you have enough because you've looked at the rubric. Same thing here. Lesson plan includes learning activities, hoping that I'm emphasizing that there, that are appropriately supporting, engaging, and then there's that and or challenging. It does not have to be all three. It just has to be one of the three or two of the three, but they really want to see that you have a lesson that's supporting students' learning, that's engaging them in the learning, and then it's challenging if need be for those that need additional challenge, right? And so this is about a decision based on your students. In this particular lesson with the students that I'm teaching, do I need to support them more and where? Do I need to engage them more and where? And or do I need to challenge them more and where? And you have to determine that and make that rationale very clear. So, and then the last thing they're going to look for, right, is the grouping strategies. Are they appropriate? Do they work for this lesson? Is there a good rationale for why you're doing that? So all of that, you can pause the video again. Where would they find that? Hopefully you come back now and realize they're going to find it right here, and probably a little bit right here too, right? And so going back to your question, do I have enough details? Go back to the rubric. Does what you put here match with what they're asking for here? And if it does, if it's clear, you're good. Okay, content-specific instructional strategies, including modeling, scaffolding that will assist students to reach expectations embedded in the learning activities, that also include higher order thinking and academic language development. They made it very clear. They're going to look for that right. I think it was here. There was another spot. I think it was here and then here. Yep. Right. So the higher order thinking piece there. Where was the academic language one? I know that we just saw that. Sorry that I'm getting off course here. Oh, here we go. There's where it was. So under the content of the lesson, right? So they'll look for that. They'll look for those specific content, specific strategies that include higher order thinking and academic language under this box. So again, look at that box and compare it to this. Okay, and so the same for your focus students. You just want to go back now and say, okay, my planned support, so looking at my plan for student learning, are clearly built on FS1's assets and learning needs. Next week, I'll talk about the rationale because that rationale will help too. But really with your focus students, you want to be going through that, right? Does what I planned in my lesson build on their assets and their learning needs from step 1A? Does my plan provide accommodations and or adaptations and accommodations as needed, right, to support that student's access of the content through these multiple modalities? And again, that's all going to be down here where you explain all that. So I don't think I need to go any further, but I think I'm giving you enough support to explain the process here, right? And so as an assessor, I am looking at level 3. If you've done that very clearly, I will jump to level 4. I would recommend you do the same when you're writing your plan. Write your plan to level 3 first, and then if you want to go higher, get a 4 or get a 5, add 2, right? And so I've already done 3 really well. What else do I need to add to this plan to get a 4? Well, I need to plan opportunities for my focus student 1 to participate in different modes of communication, or going back up to the first rubric, right? I need to make sure my lesson plan provides detailed explanation of proposed instructional adaptations and accommodations to support focus students, right? So do level 3 first. If you want to go higher, add the next pieces. Rubric 1.1 through 1.4 are the rubrics they will use to look at step 1A, step 1B, and step 1C. So I think I've given you enough of a fire hose. You can go back to this video, slow it down, rewind. If there is anything in this video that seems still confusing or you have questions about, just annotate it, right? Like, hey, write in, Riddle, at this point in your video, you said this. I'm a little confused about what you meant. Come see me in office hours. Let me help clarify it. So I hope that helps as you are engaging in your independent work with the TPA.